I'm on mute. We're going live here, so hopefully this works. Do you have a camera? Still showing me your icon on your video. There you are. Very good. Okay, let me see if we can show. Seconds to spare. That's how we do it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll call you in. People are listening right now can hear me talking. They can't hear you yet, so I'll let you know once I unmute you. All right, we are live. Hey, welcome everybody. Tonight we are going to be talking about aliens and extraterrestrials and all that fun stuff. Tonight's going to be kind of more of a fun little lesson. I will say that we have a special guest for us tonight, and our special guest is Major Kurt Russell. Kurt, how are
everyone.
you?
I'm doing fine, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant Roberts. I look forward to chatting with the group tonight.
That's fantastic. We look forward to having you. Let's see. We are going to go ahead and jump right into it. It was fun. This was a good effort on Major Russell's part. We had some technical stuff we were working through and literally fixed it 20 seconds before while we were going live. I was hitting the going live button and we got it to work. So great effort. Shows you never quit.
That's right.
All right. So here is some new screens. So, Major Russell, I want to check. Can you see my screen share? This way you can see what slide I'm on? All right, fantastic.
I love your funny gray guy there. Yeah.
That's what I look like when I go on a diet.
Anorexia, big time there.
That's right. I decided to start eating more at McDonald's. I thought I looked better than that. So what we're going to talk about tonight is recently we had a situation where the Department of Defense released a couple of historical Navy videos. This is from earlier 2007. And it turns out the reason they released these videos was not so much they thought that we should see these. It's because another group outside of the Department of Defense had already released these videos. And so the Department of Defense had gotten a lot of questions. Hey, are these videos true? Did this really happen? And so the Navy took a look at the videos. They determined that there was nothing of a secret clearance requirement or anything in there that could show targeting information. And so they decided to go ahead and release these videos. And so these three videos in particular have sparked just an amazing amount of conversation online. And so there's a lot of folks that believe in extraterrestrials or UFOs, and so they've really latched on to these videos. There's skeptics that will point out this is largely probably a missile, some type of missile, Tomahawk cruise missile on the ground. Who knows? I would think the Navy would know that if there's a Tomahawk cruise missile flying within 3 miles of their jets. But anyways, so a couple of things here that were important. So normal folks, we call these UFOs, unidentified flying objects. The military likes to call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. And then I already mentioned that these were not actually officially released. The Navy didn't do this on their own. These videos were actually released first and then later deemed not sensitive. So a couple things before we actually view the videos I wanted to go over so you kind of understand a little bit more about what you're seeing and make it a little bit more educational than just fun. So you're going to hear some conversation between a pilot and another individual. Matter of fact, the individual who is very excited, to say the least, is what we call a wizzo. And so a wizzo is that's a slang for a weapons systems officer. And so this is a flight officer. Usually they sit in the back of, say, an F-18 or an F-15. And also, like if you're over in Europe, the FELB, they have wizzos. And so there's so much information that is seen that the pilot has control over that the wizzos actually help. They help with the targeting systems. They help with communications. In some very rare setups, a wizzo can take over some of the flight for the pilot if something's going on. That doesn't happen all that often, but it is capable in some aircraft. Now, obviously, a wizzo is only in a two-person airplane. So if you see like an F-22 fighter jet, there is no wizzo. The pilot's all by himself. The wizzo is really the AI computer, basically, at that point. And so that's what a wizzo is. So when you hear the second person talking, that second person is the wizzo. All right. The second thing is what you're actually seeing is not a camera. It's not like the video camera, the pilot's shooting the video camera out the window. What you're seeing is the footage from what's called an advanced targeting forward-looking infrared radar. So it's called AT-FLIR is how you'll hear it responded to in the military, AT-FLIR. And so this is a pod, and we'll talk about this in a second, but if you're on an F-18 or F-15, pretty much if you're in the Navy, the pod sits on the left-hand side of the wing next to the fuselage. Now, if you're in the Air Force and you're on an F-16, the pod would sit on the right-hand side of the fuselage. And so when we see the images, the videos, it will look like a camera, but it's not a camera. It's actually looking at infrared. Now, these do have TV, what they call TV mode, and one of the videos will actually go in the TV mode, and we'll share that when that happens. So that is the AT-FLIR. All right, so when you are looking at the video, a couple things here for you to learn, just to make this a little bit more valuable for you. If you look at the very top here, you'll see where it says IR. And so that's where you can tell if the targeting pod is in either infrared or if it's in TV mode. Next to on the left-hand side, you're going to see where it says NAR. That means it's a narrow field of view. So instead of it being wide, it's very narrow. You're going to see underneath the IR, you're going to see it says 35 and then L. And so that means that if the plane is going this way and what it's looking at is 35 degrees off of its nose and to the left. Like, if it's at R, it would be 35 to the right. And then that 35 is the number of degrees. Underneath that, and the middle side here, you will see the minus 22. The minus 22 indicates that it is 22 degrees below the nose. So if we didn't see the minus, that would mean it was above the nose. If we see the minus, we means we're below the nose. The next thing over here on the right-hand side, this LS, that means it's in laser spotting mode. Now they actually were not, even though it was in laser spotting mode, there was actually no laser, but this is where you could have laser targeting. Down here, you see the altitude that the aircraft is flying at. In this case, this aircraft was flying at exactly 25,000 feet. So I'm assuming he was in, or she, actually we know it was a guy. He was in autopilot, otherwise flying at that speed, going exactly at the right altitude. That's pretty impressive. Over on the left-hand side of the bottom, we see Mach. That's what the M stands for. And 0.61, so that means that the aircraft is going 0.61 Mach. So not really all that fast. They can go a lot faster, obviously, but they were just kind of up there cruising along pretty nice. And the last thing, which is really important to know, is this BLK. You'll see that say BLK or WHT. Black hot means that hot objects are going to show up as a black image. And if it was white hot, WHT, then the white hot objects are going to show up as white. And so we're going to see in the first video, the object at one point when they do switch it, the object will be white. And so what that will mean, even though they're in black hot, what that will mean then is that that object is that, you'll actually hear them reference this in the video, that means that the object is actually colder than the water around it. So some individuals think that this might have been some type of a missile, a low-flying missile, targeting missile. If it was that, then we would expect that not to be colder than the water underneath it. We would expect it to be hotter. So we would expect it to be black. Now, the other thing, too, is up here, it didn't show up in my screenshot. It shows up a little bit later. But right here, you're going to see a range. And this aircraft, at this video, I think it was around 3.7 or 4 nautical miles. So really close. So when we watch the video, and I'll pause the video at one point, we'll go over it again. But it's really close. And so the aircraft was flying here, and whatever the object was, it was flying 35 degrees off its nose, 22 degrees down, and only 3, 4, 5 nautical miles away. So super close for a jet. It was basically on top of it almost. And so that was pretty interesting. All right. So here is the actual video. So Major Russell, was there anything you wanted to add before I showed the video?
No, that's okay. I'll just observe this video and we can comment later.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much. And again, for those folks, because we didn't do any housekeeping or news today, I kind of wanted to jump right into this. So go ahead, and if you have questions, feel free to post the questions. I still, for some reason, I can't see the questions in my streaming software. That's still not working. I'm not sure why. But while we have the presentation up, I can't see your questions. But feel free, say hi to everybody, introduce yourselves if you're new. And if you have any questions, go ahead and post it. Once we're done with our presentation, I'll drop the PowerPoint presentation here, and we will take a look at your questions. All right, with that, let's watch this. Oops. There you can see the white dot.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Logic.
Okay, so one thing I want to point out there, one, that's really loud in my ears too. So anybody who's listening to that with headphones on, like Major Russell and myself, we probably went, whoa, that was loud. It is loud. So one thing a lot of people online that are saying is, hey, he's so excited because he found something that he can't explain. He found a UFO, and that's what he's excited about. And pretty sure that's actually not what he's excited about. What he's excited about is this is a relatively pretty small object. As a matter of fact, here you can see the range I was talking about, the 4.1. So you can see the range. It's relatively small, and it was moving really fast. And he's literally, it's like if you're playing a video game and you have to like move your mouse to grab something. Unfortunately, he's in a moving airplane. And he's trying to put a targeting ring basically around the object. And then once he's got it tracked, then the targeting pod will stay on it. And that's why you see he moved quite a bit, and then it locked directly on it. It stayed on it nonstop. So it's kind of like, since we just had May the 4th for Star Wars, if you look at Star Wars and they had their targeting system, right, with the block would go around the enemy ship, and and Han Solo got all excited and screamed, and, I got it, That's basically what the Wizzo's doing here. He was excited because he was able to track this small moving object, so that's what you're hearing him excited.
Roger. There's troubleshooting. Are you box moving target? No.
Now you'll see here in the bottom, he just changed, right? So it was black, and the object was white, which means that it was colder than the surrounding. And now he switched it so that it's white, and now the object is black. And so that means if the object was warmer, that object would be white. And since it's black, it means it's actually colder than the sea behind it. So that's actually a really important, I don't want to say clue, because nobody knows what this thing is. And if they do, they haven't told us. But that tells us that it's colder than the water behind it right now. So that's really fascinating.
Took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that, man.
Oops. Okay, so one other thing I want to, that was the end of that video. One thing I want to point out before we go on to the other videos is you see this little white dot here. So that's actually where the pod is actually pointing, which as a technical geek, I find that interesting because that shows the pod is actually, the camera on the pod is moving ahead of the object and slightly above it. So before we move on to any of the other videos, Major Russell, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, the first time I saw this video, the pilot's obviously very excited at what he sees, and he makes quite an exclaiming statements about it. And he said that I think they first saw when they were on a training mission, by the way, when this is all occurring off San Diego, I think some miles, and he saw some disturbance on the water while he was on this training mission, and then is able to acquire the object. So, it's obviously, I think he said it came up out of the water and he saw a disturbance. So it had been what we call in other parlance, a USO. So it had been actually a submerged object at one time and then becomes visible above the water, which is another very fascinating aspect of this.
Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, since if it was possibly under the water, now we don't know what it is. And, I guess I'll put out the legal disclaimer for anybody watching this video, CAP or anybody else outside of CAP. We have no idea, right? We don't know. We are just having some educated guessing, some educated fun, having some of the conversations tonight, some what if conversations. We don't know. We don't have, the last I checked, Major Russell, did they renew your top secret clearance for Area 51?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I could no longer get there any better than you can. So.
Okay. Well, we tried storming the fence a few months ago and we didn't make it in. So, and so, one of the things I thought about was if it came from under the water, I almost, some people were saying about it being possibly a missile or some type of a drone. And I'm wondering if there was possibly a submarine in the area that maybe launched, underwater missile or underwater submarine. Now, you would think that a pilot would see the air, so when you launch something out of a sub, usually there's an air compressor that shoots it through the air, creates a little bubble of air around the object. And usually, you would think if you were above, you would see that. You would see a big explosion of air when it came out of the water. So you would think the pilots would see that. But all right, that's interesting. Actually, I did not know. I did not hear about the fact that they thought they saw it coming out of the water.
There have been many stories over the years of what they call USOs. So the UFO phenomena does not extend itself just to aerial phenomena. There's a number of cases, some military base, some people just out fishing in a lake that has seen objects under the water and rise out of the water. And there have been stories of that our subs have actually tracked these at extraordinary speeds, much beyond the capability of our underwater craft to travel at.
Yeah, I guess if you're underwater and the fastest you can go is 30 knots, and you see something going 200 knots, you start questioning what that is. The last I knew that Finding Nemo, Nemo couldn't swim that fast. So, all right, very good. Well, let's go on to the next video. We'll swing back here. Now, the next two videos, unfortunately, are a lot blurrier, so we don't get it as nice and clean. You can tell which ones the older ones are. And also, we can't. I'm going to pause it for a second. So a couple things we can tell. So we can tell it's IR, so it's infrared. We see that it is 4 degrees off the right, so it's almost directly on its nose. And we can see, to me, that looks like a 6. So 6 degrees, since there's no minus. So that means that it's literally, if the airplane is pointing like this, it is just off the nose and just a little bit to the right. A little bit high, a little bit to the right. So, but otherwise, the aircraft's pointing almost right at it. Down here, we see it says WHT. That's at least what I see. And yeah, it's definitely a WHT, right? Yeah. And so that means if it's hotter than its surrounding, then it would be white. Since the nose of the aircraft is pointing right at it, my assumption is that this is hotter than the air temperature that it's around. It's no longer comparing the temperature with the sea because it's looking at it through air. We can see here, again, I guess Navy jets like to fly at 20,000 feet because this pilot is also right at 90,000 feet. The other thing you will notice is that there is no ranging information. So also they are a narrow band again. Again, they are looking very narrow band. So instead of a wide view, the camera is really focused in on it. And again, you'll see over here a couple times, it'll say a bunch of 9s. What that's telling the pilot or the Wizzo is that it doesn't have a good range information, doesn't have good range tracking. And so when it doesn't have that and it's trying to get it, it'll actually throw a bunch of 9s. So when you see that, it doesn't mean that it's over 1,000 miles away. It just means it doesn't have good tracking. So let's go ahead and watch this. And there, what happened here, if you'll notice, that it went from IR to TV. So now, instead of just looking through infrared, it is now actually looking through a regular camera, just like you or me would have on our cell phones, except, a $10 million camera sitting in a pod. And so I guess while we're watching, you can see the range information coming up there now versus 99.9. So it's trying to get the range, but it doesn't quite have it. And here he switched back to IR. And you can see they're flying right at it. 0 degrees, 1 degree, still a little bit above. They're doing a good job. Again, it's probably autopilot, but they're doing a good job holding their autopilot, their flight level there. Okay. And that is that one again. He switched back and forth, and then we saw it zoom off to the left. Now that could have been the targeting pod might have just lost its tracking on it, and then they ended the video. So Major Russell, what do you think about that one? Anything there? Thought you're interested?
Well, there's a lot of backstory to this story. These actually events took place over at least about a 5-day period of time in November of 2004. And this supposedly prior to this incident in early November 2004, a Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser, the USS Princeton, started recording intermittent radar tracks on one of its advanced passive scanned array radars. So they actually have been sighted these objects some days before this. Oh. So these are just a number of events that we're seeing. And of course, any part of this training, you're going to have some support craft in the area. Mm-hmm. So they have other ways of detecting these things as well. So the missile cruiser had its phased array radar going as well, and as well, of course, the ones that are aboard the F-18s as well have their own visual and other kinds of means of detection, including this infrared view here. So it seems like this phenomena had been hanging around the carrier group for a period of time. Mm-hmm. So there's other information about this. So that's all I have to offer at this time, but it's very fascinating.
That's actually really interesting what you just mentioned there too about, I didn't even think about that because, we're Navy. I'm just thinking about the airplane being up there with maybe a wingman or something. But yeah, since it was Navy, it would have had an aircraft carrier, and an aircraft carrier would have an entire, fleet around it. So there would be a lot of radar. There'd be a lot of support, vessels and possibly other flights of aircraft up there. So that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, there's a whole carrier group that goes with this. At least there's 2 ships that are mentioned here. The USS Nimitz and the USS Princeton have been tracking these objects. So this is just, further confirmation that they had a lot of our technology looking at these objects, and they were doing some extraordinary things.
It almost makes you want to know where the other videos are that somebody's got somewhere.
Yes, and of course there was a lot of debriefing that went on after this, and the Pentagon has totally classified that debriefing.
I bet.
There's a lot more information than what they chose to share here, but they're just obviously not sharing it with us.
Now, does CAP, as AE officers, do we have the ability to go see those videos? You think that they would declassify those for just the two of us? I'd like to see them.
Yeah, we could try to say that, hey, we have rank and privilege, but
That's right.
I think they would say no.
It's probably the case. I don't think either you or me could probably land our Cessna on a carrier, anyways. So.
No. Yeah, this is the Navy. Who knows how well they get along with the Air Force anyway.
That's true. That's true. The other thing I want to point out too, I did put a link at the very bottom of the screen. These videos I did not get off of somebody else's YouTube. So these weren't edited by somebody else. These actually I got directly from the Navy. So the Navy has a document repository, and they have a classification for Freedom of Information Act. And so you'll see the FOIA, that's what FOIA stands for. It stands for Freedom of Information Act. And then, so this is the link. So if you wanted to go to that link, you would be able to find these videos directly the way I did and download them yourself. What's also interesting is that Freedom of Information Act area, the Navy has some additional documents and PDF files where they talk about these videos. I did actually read and review those, and honestly, they don't say anything that's really of too much value. So, they basically say, yeah, we got something and we're not sure what it is, and, here you go. So that was pretty much all they said. All right, we have one more of these. All right.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro.
Sorry for the language. I didn't catch that the first time.
The whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
So again, just let us learn something here, right? So one thing I think is interesting is, again, the same targeting type pod system. And so right now it is 33 degrees off the left-hand side of the nose. It is just under its nose. So they're at 25,000 feet. So whatever this is flying pretty much right at 24,000, depending how far away it is, 24,000-ish feet, somewhere in that range. And just off to its left. You can tell that the aircraft is in a bank. Based on this is the angle of the aircraft. And so it almost looks like the aircraft was going to try to come around to its backside. From what it looks like to me. And then down here, we can see where it says black, meaning that the objects that are showing as black are warmer than the surrounding. So this is above the air, so that object is emitting heat. And what's interesting is, unlike what you might find with a drone, a missile wouldn't look like this, I don't think, but a drone, other aircraft, I would expect that the whole thing wouldn't be black like that. But again, I'm not a Wizzo. I'm not trained in this type of a targeting pod. So maybe if another aircraft was up there, it would look like that. It's obviously not a helicopter. It's at 25,000 feet, 24,000 feet, so it's not going to be a helicopter. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it for this one. All right, so let's keep playing.
West. Look at that thing, dude.
All right, so I'm going to pause again here real quick just to drive everybody nuts. It's about to do something that is super interesting. So this thing is traveling, right? So if we look down here, it looks like cruising speed for Navy jets is around 0.6 Mach, right? Because we've been seeing that pretty close to the other ones too. So they're traveling at 0.59 Mach, close to 0.6. And so they're pretty much targeting behind this. It's not getting bigger or smaller. It doesn't look like to me anyways. So this object is probably traveling close to the same speed, maybe. Again, we don't know. We weren't there. But it's traveling into the wind. And so it's about to do something that's really interesting, that's going into the wind.
That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating.
Oops, I'm going to go back there. All right. So to me, that personally is super exciting because that thing just threw its complete at least from what this video looks like, and again, we're not there, so maybe, it could have been a turn and just, it just showed itself, it's broadsided itself a little bit. But if that really did turn like that and it looks the way it looks, it's going into the wind at that speed, that'd be a lot of pressure against that craft. So, well, that was our third one. Major Russell, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I saw some of the comments that were quoted on this one. The Navy pilots supposedly reported to their superiors that the objects had no visible engine or infrared exhaust plumes, but that they could reach 30,000 feet at hypersonic speeds.
Wow.
So these crafts were maneuvering at extreme speeds. Hypersonic, as you know, are well beyond the speed that they were going. And we're probably talking Mach 2, 3, 4, and above.
Wow.
And no visible exhaust plumes. Well, when you see this video and you see that, the object appears to have a heat signature, there are no exhaust plumes coming from it indicating any kind of jet exhaust or anything that we conventionally use to propel our aircraft. And the fact that it's actually even pivoting while it's moving in this direction
at that speed
is something that's extraordinary. That put extraordinary stress on any kind of airframe that we would have, and would probably result in a tumble and loss of aircraft control.
Yeah, the wings. We always go back to force equals mass times acceleration, right? So if that thing was going at, say, Mach 3, and so it had that acceleration, and we don't know what the mass of this object could be, but where that mass is, if it's showing itself and it's making a turn like that, the amount of force on that equation would just be pretty massive, because we're talking about SR-71 speeds, where an SR-71 is basically just a dart in the air, and it's not maneuvering when it's going that fast. And you sure could see the plume coming off of an SR-71 when it was going at that speed. So that was pretty fascinating. Let's see here. All right. So any other comments? So we're going to go into our next point of this conversation. But before I did, Major Russell, any other thoughts on those videos?
Well, no. I mean, they're coming from actually, a decade apart or more. Those two sets of videos there. So it's obvious that these aircrafts have an operating frequency in this area, just like our own Navy has been operating in this area for training off of San Diego for many years. These aircraft, whatever they are, tend to come back and revisit the area. And actually, earlier, what I heard is that the Princeton was sending radar data and directed the F-18 pilots to these areas. And of course, they remained in that area long enough for our pilots to be sighting them. And it would seem obvious that these objects know that they're being observed, because they, in a sense, they're almost like posing for us for a period of time. That's, of course, conjecture. That's free.
Yeah, so, we don't know anything.
We don't know anything. But
we're not speaking on behalf of the Air Force.
Perform at extreme speeds, and yet they continue to hover there at subsonic speed for a period of time, and then, of course, kind of show off, you might say.
So the showing off and posing, I think, is really interesting. So we're actually towards the end of the presentation tonight. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit, about if that's true, right? And listen, we're basically a bunch of college guys having a 2 a.m. conversation right now about aliens. And so, you see the Air Force emblems. We are not speaking on behalf of the Air Force. We don't know anything, but that's right. All right. So our next thing we really want to talk about is, are aliens real, right? So if you know this answer, please, you let us know. We'd like to know. And so, what I really want to focus on is what's called the Drake equation. And so we're going to go through this. It's actually a pretty interesting equation. And so the Drake equation basically tries to answer, one, are aliens real? If they are, how many are there? And this looks really complicated. It looks like some funky calculus that you would do in your third year of college. But it's not at all. We're going to go through it step by step. It's actually pretty straightforward. And so the big thing to know is this N. We're going to go through each of these means, but N is the number of civilizations in our galaxy in which we might be able to talk to that are on our current past light cone. So our past light cone, we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but it is 1 light year. That's it. That's all it is. So, we talk about the Milky Way galaxy as 1,000 light years apart. we could have another civilization. Well, I'm going to pause that. We have charts to show that. We'll get there. So this R is the average rate of star formation. So how often a star forms, how many times we get a new star. There's a lot of stars forming, so it's bigger than you think. The fraction of those stars that have planets. NE, the average number of planets that can potentially support life. How many of the fraction of those planets that could support life that actually can go on to develop intelligence. And then of those intelligent life forms, how many of those could actually develop technology to be able to talk into space? And then finally, how long could they talk for? We are hoping that the human race lasts forever and ever and ever. But in the span of the galaxy, humans haven't been around for the blink of an eye, basically. And so, there could be something really bad happens. There's a major war. We have this pandemic going on. Obviously, nobody expects this pandemic to wipe out the human race. But, hey, who knows? 2,000 years from now, maybe there is a pandemic that wipes out the human race. And so, so all of a sudden our communications is going to stop. Maybe 10,000 years from now, there's a rogue comet that hits the earth and we become the dinosaurs, 100,000 years from now. So that's what L means. And then this is a picture of Dr. Frank Drake. All right. So what were the original estimates, right? So, the original estimates that they came out with in 1961 indicated that on average, every year, there is a brand new star that is formed in the Milky Way galaxy. So if you think about the fact that, the sun has been around for billions and billions of years, and the Milky Way galaxy has been around for, I forget what the number is, like 11 billion years or 14 billion years. And I'm sure within 100 years, they'll have a different number for how long the Milky Way galaxy's been here. But so once every year, actually, in the cosmic scale of things, is actually quite a bit. And then they originally thought that, hey, 1/5 to a half of all those stars will have planets. And they thought that about 1 to 5 of those might have planets that are capable of developing some kind of life. Again, life does not mean walking, breathing, talking things, right? It could be a single cell, living animal. If you ever, I don't know what the number is, but if you ever Googled, how many living animals make up you, it's amazing, right? So you are not just one living thing. You are a collection of living things, billions and billions of living things. And then, of those, how many will develop life? So the first one is how many could develop life. And then of that, how many would develop life? Now, this is interesting. So what they felt was, given their small sample size of the Earth and how easy and how quick life started to form based on when they think it was ready to form, that life is readily available. Then the next thing after that is after life forms, how often does it become intelligent life? And astrobiologists, again, back then, they felt that was almost a given. That given, replication and the strong survive, and then if you're smarter, you're more likely to survive, and all of that stuff, that intelligent life was a given. It would happen automatically. And then of that, now we're going to talk about a small number, right? So of that, only 10 to 20% of that would be able to communicate outside of its planet. So you might get things like apes, things of that where they're intelligent, but monkeys aren't making satellites and building satellite dishes. And then lastly, the L, they felt that on average, if once a civilization starts communicating into space, and for us that was only 70 years ago. It was during one of the Olympics. It was a famous video actually of Hitler. Unfortunately for us, Hitler was our first ambassador to the United States from a TV perspective. Thankfully, he didn't say anything too bad. He was welcoming people to the Summer Olympics. So thankfully that it was a bad person, but the message at least wasn't too horrible. And then so 1,000 years. So at the low end, they thought, hey, listen, once you develop a certain amount of technology, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to blow yourselves up really fast, Or if you can get past the phase of blowing yourself up fast in wars, then you could last a really long time. And that's where we see the 100 million years. So I guess our clock has started. We're at 70 years. Hopefully we keep going for the 100 million years. Let's see here. I'll bring you in 1 second, Major Russell, but I did want to talk about, actually, this is actually a good spot. Let me bring it back to the original estimates. Any thoughts here?
Well, the only thing, of course, we're actually looking at a theory here, of course, and we have to also consider that there are probably metaphysical or spiritual even considerations too. So for those of us in our audience that adhere to a biblical concept of creation, we think that perhaps this doesn't exclude the fact that God might have created far more than just this one civilization here on this planet. So, but of course, Dr. Drake is not a creationist in his thinking, so he's going to look at this from a quote science viewpoint. But any belief system that believes in a God would not actually limit the fact that there would be possibly other civilizations created. There's nothing I know of in the Bible that actually speaks of that. So that we might be the only ones, only that we were created in his image, and that's from a certain biblical standpoint. So, and there are other, of course, religious views out there. So just because you might be a believer in a God that's created all things, that doesn't exclude the fact that he could have actually created far more than we know here in this universe. In fact, somebody said at one time that if we're the only intelligent life in the universe, then there's an awful lot of wasted space.
Love that comment.
And so I thought that was a pretty good way of putting it. And there's no way of knowing any of this, other than the anecdotal evidence that we have from historical ufology and people claiming that they've seen things, including even down to seeing beings themselves. So there's a lot to consider here. And how long would our civilization exist, in an advanced state? The fact is, we've had periods of our development that have left us stagnant in our development. If there are other beings in the world, in the universe, and there could very well be many more of them, we could actually talk a little bit later, if we have time, about the Kepler mission and how many actual exoplanets have been discovered outside of our solar system. Right now, they're well past 2,000 that have just been discovered by this one space mission that's been running since 2009.
Right.
So there's a lot more out there and even our own galaxy, which is only one of maybe billions of galaxies in the universe.
We actually have a slide. We're going to be talking about Kepler, so that'll be good timing for that too. So, one thing, I am conscious of time. We are going to go for a longer lesson tonight, but we're having a great conversation. So, feel free to hang with us. Or if you are watching this at another time, because we're on YouTube, so this is recorded, feel free, pause it, come back, pick this up another time if you don't have the full time to invest tonight. But we are going to talk about Kepler. But one thing I thought that was interesting was the Pope. I am not Catholic. Is it Pope Francis? Is that the current Pope's name? I don't know. I don't know if you know either. But the
not Catholic either.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So sorry for those folks that are Catholic. I'm gonna get a million chat messages now with the name of the Pope. But the current Pope he actually made a comment about 3 years ago when somebody asked him about the rift between science and religion. And he actually, I thought, did a wonderful, and I wish I could quote him, but he did a wonderful job answering that question. I really, really appreciated. And he said that, there is no disagreement between science and religion. Science is, in his mind, science is trying to solve the knowledge of religion. And so, there's a lot of things that if you're highly religious that you will believe. And science, in his mind, isn't at odds with that. Science, we talk about this all the time in the Greenville Composite Squadron, especially if I'm doing a really heavy science class. I'll always tell people, what I tell you today, I'm probably lying to you. And 20 years from now, we're going to tell you something else. So science just keeps asking the questions. So I thought that was interesting. All right, so let's go through some of what people are thinking now. We're actually going to talk about Kepler. Star formation. So they came out to a little bit higher number of stars. And this is actually from Kepler is part of this, the reason for this. And that was, they think that in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and again, there's billions of galaxies, right? So we're only talking about our one galaxy. We're not talking about the universe as a whole. We're talking about our one galaxy. That there is, give or take, 1.5 to 3. You can't have a half a star. So between 1 and 3 stars on average are formed. And they can do that by looking at the amount of material in a gas cloud and then the formation of that gas cloud. So really interesting. And so here you can see the arrow I've got pointed to, I always got to do it the opposite way. The R is the average rate of star formation. All right. And so then we look at fractions of planets. Now this is something that changed big, right? So before the thought equation, again, this whole thing, and Major Russell said it perfect. This whole thing is a thought equation. It doesn't really, there's no real answer here. You just are changing variables and it gives you kind of a thought, something to think about. It's not an actual equation where you're going to get an actual number and go, oh, there's 10,000 aliens out there. It doesn't work that way. And so one of the things that changed, and this is also because of Kepler, that they used to think that, roughly 20% of stars would have a planet. Not a planet that could have life, but a planet surrounding it. And they have looked at pretty much every star, and almost every star has planets. So they have now taken that from roughly 20% to 100%. So right there, that would, if you thought you had 10,000 civilizations, now you just multiplied that by 5. Now you have 50,000 civilizations. So that's that. All right. So now that we have, I'm sorry,
Lieutenant Roberts?
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I'm looking at the NASA site right now, and they said some of the results of the Kepler mission, they believe, are that planets do outnumber stars.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're that common. Planets are that common, and some have multiple planets. So, we have reason to know because of that one equation there that that has to be rethought too. We have more planets out there than we do have stars, and we have supposedly 100 billion in our own galaxy.
That's
stars.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's also amazing that they haven't even. This equation doesn't even take account into is of those planets. Let's say Jupiter. Which is a large planet. Now, it's outside of our habitable zone, but let's say you had Jupiter, a Jupiter-sized planet inside of a habitable zone for another star. What about the moons? Could you have life on a moon, right? So we're not even, this is just talking about planets, and we're not even thinking about moons. So that's really fascinating. So now, again, here we're actually listing Kepler right there. So based on Kepler, there could be as many as 40 billion Earth-sized planets, and this is older information. This was 2013, and as you had mentioned, with their current analysis, they're over. They think it's well over 100 billion Earth-sized.
Yeah. Currently, they've supposedly found at least 2,600 planets that are confirmed. Confirmed planets.
And what,
Since
5 years
Kepler
ago,
was
they had
launched
3 planets or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Kepler was launched 9.5 years ago, and it's observed 530,000 stars at least in that time, and at least 2,600 of them have planets.
Oh. And actually, there's one thing I want to point out here before we move on, is that notice here it says the nearest planet in the habitable zone is Proxima Centauri b. And so you'll always hear people talk about Proxima Centauri b. And so that's our closest that we know so far. Now, with all the this is older information. And so possibly with the new Kepler data, maybe they have found something closer. But as of this one, that was the closest one we had, and that was 4.2 light years away. So just remember that 4.2 light years. We're going to come back to that. All right, so moving down. All right, so now we have planets. And then we have planets now that are talking about being in a habitable zone where they could develop life. Now, the FL, and that's not an I, that's an L, so function of life, or fraction of life, that's how many will develop life. And scientists still believe that this is more common than not, and what's called abiogenesis. And that, so if you give life the opportunity to form, that life finds a way, as the saying goes. And so our next thing was, oops, I went the wrong way. And so next, F function of I, that's intelligence, I for intelligent life. And so F of I is, how likely is it to be intelligent? And again, same thing with the original equation. Their thought is once life finds a way, that over time, this obviously, to Major Russell's point, this is very much an evolutionist thinking, to this equation. And so their thought is that based on evolution, your intelligence is almost inevitable. Okay. Next thing is now, just because you're intelligent, it doesn't mean that you can build a satellite. So this is the same thing. This is probably, I think every part of this equation is debatable, but this one here probably has the most amount of debate. So how often can you get from, say, a dolphin, which is, an intelligent being, capable of communicating with other dolphins? We can't speak dolphin yet. Someday we will. Hopefully the Google translator will work for that someday. But they don't have, to our knowledge, there's no satellites built by dolphins. And so this one is really, really interesting. One interesting point here I did put in the bold was that the Earth telescopes, radio telescopes, we can only detect at the currently, and this is with our new high range telescopes, not even talking about stuff from 50 years ago. They can only detect an Earth powered radio transmission from a light year away, 1 light year. And so what that means is if you took the Earth with all of our radio communication that we do, and you put us 2 light years away from us, which is literally right next door to us, we wouldn't, with our current technology, we would not be able to receive the signals. Now, if you had an alien civilization, they knew where we were, they could do a really high-powered radio pointed right at us, then we'd probably be able to receive that. Or, if somebody happened to be a lot closer to us, or in the future, if we develop a much better technology of receiving radio signals, then we might be able to extend that 1 light year to 2 light years, to 4 light years, to 5 light years. But as of right now, our current radio telescopes can only hear 1 light year away, and Proxima Centauri b is 4.7 light years away. So there could be an Earth in Proxima Centauri, and we have no idea. And our last one. So how long is a lifetime? So current scientists, they broke this down a little differently. So they looked at this and said, how much for a civilization? So not how long are humans going to be around, but how long for a civilization? So like the Romans were a civilization. The Babylonians were a civilization. Right now we are, post-Roman, obviously, because the Romans were 2,000 years ago, give or take. And so now we are at 300, but they think the 300 years is a modern civilization. Now, I think that's pretty low, right? Because, Europe has been around for a lot longer than that. People in Italy would probably argue that that's probably not the case. But I think what they're talking about here is that because we're only 70 years from the time that we've been sending transmission. And so it's not 300 years that people are around. It's how long can you communicate out. And so what they're saying is 304, how they come up with that number, I'm not sure, but between Michael is saying, Shermer is saying 420. Another individual is saying 304 for modern civilizations. So let's hope that they're wrong, because what they're basing that on is based on war. That you get to a certain point and you get technologically advanced, you find really efficient ways of killing large numbers of people. And so, between basically World War II, which is when we started communicating into space, and 300 years or 400 years, something bad might happen that we do to ourselves, if not something else. So, all right. Anyways, I'm not going to go through all these calculations, but I just wanted to really show those 2 bold, at the end of the 2 bolds. And so what you can see is if you play with the numbers a little bit and you think that you're being really conservative, you can see that it comes out to 9.1 to 10 to the minus 13. So basically almost no chance. And if you do the equation just a little bit more positive, you can see that the equation says that there's 15,600,000 civilizations just in our galaxy alone. So again, this is just an equation that's just a thought effort. Doesn't really tell us anything. Let's see. We're going to go on to the Fermi paradox next, but before I did, I wanted to give you a chance to give your thoughts there, Major Russell.
Well, I don't have much on a scientific equation like this. He was actually the first, Professor Drake, to come up with this, and so he kind of set a standard of sorts. Mm-hmm. But we can see that our knowledge, even having increased a great deal in almost 60 years, shows us that there's a lot more out there than even we have managed to think about. And I was very fascinated to hear that our current way of reading extends maybe only to a light year out. Mm-hmm. They say the next potentially habitable star would be Barnard's star, and that's at about 5.9 light years. Mm-hmm. And that supposedly has a exoplanet in orbit that could possibly support life. So, some people would say, why haven't we received a signal? Well, right. Maybe we're just not technologically advanced to be able to receive the signals that are sent. And maybe they have found another way to communicate that's so far above us that we can't possibly detect that.
Yeah, because as we're talking,
there might be other.
Yeah, because as we're talking, we're moving from radio to fiber optic, right? Fiber optic under the sea floors, fiber optics to our houses, cable TV, cables running. None of that uses radio waves. So there might be a very small amount of time that a civilization actually utilizes radio waves. It may be a very early technology, and so you may only have 100, 200 years that a civilization even uses radio. Yeah.
And maybe they found that it was easier to get here through some kind of wormhole, as we talk about in Star Trek physics, right?
I'm waiting for that day. I like those. All right. So the one thing that the Drake equation didn't initially cover was the Drake equation only looks at is life out there today, right? And again, just a thought experiment. But, how much life is out there? What it doesn't do is it doesn't say, has life ever existed, right? We're talking, we've been on this planet, or I should say the sun has been formed for over 4 billion years. The Milky Way galaxy, I think it's in one of my slides, but the Milky Way galaxy is like 11 to 14 billion years is their current thinking. And so there is a lot of life that could have existed, very advanced life, that could have existed 2 billion years ago. We would have no idea. We unfortunately, the human race, if we don't start hopping from planet to planet ourselves and something bad happens on the Earth, sorry to say, folks, nobody might never know that we existed. Which is kind of a sad thought, but it's the way it works. All right, so the Fermi paradox. So now this is where we talk about. So if life is this is what the Fermi paradox says. It says, if life is so abundant, why don't we see it? Where's the evidence, right? And so that's exactly what we were just talking about. And so Proxima Centauri is 4.2 billion light years away. As Major Russell had indicated, the next, as far as we can tell, the next habitable planet, is even further than that on an exoplanet. And Major Russell, if you can, why don't you explain to the cadets or the folks that are listening what an exoplanet is?
Well, an exoplanet is obviously a planet that's in basically orbit around another star system beyond our own. Mm-hmm. So exo meaning outside, outside of our own solar system. We have currently 8 planets. It used to be 9. I still like to think of Pluto as the 9th, but I'm sad for Pluto. I got a chance to meet that guy one time, and I missed it. He visited Greenville several years ago, the man that discovered Pluto. But anyways, all that to say, yeah, it's just another star system with planets, basically, an exoplanet.
Great, thank you. All right, so now, so as we're searching and as we're listening, right, we talk about SETI. And so we talk about the Fermi paradox. Hey, why haven't we seen anything? People hear SETI and they think big scientific program. And that is totally not the case. I was actually shocked by this. I'll tell you this, Major Russell. I was shocked today when I saw with the budget prior to 2015, it was about $1 million a year. $1 million a year. Think about that. I
Used
mean,
to be
that's
higher
so
than
low.
that in their heyday, you know.
Yeah. And
I think actually was maybe 10 million at one point. But even that, they do a lot with what little they have, you might say.
right. I mean, it's hard to, you think about how many scientists might work on SETI, and to think if you got $1 million to spend on salaries, that doesn't go very far.
No, it doesn't.
So
They take a lot of donations, and you can go to their website, and they'll gladly take your donation.
And so, speaking of donations, thankfully their budget has gotten a boost since 2015. They are, give or take, about $10 million a year for the last 5 years and for the next 5 years. They got a $100 million gift from a Russian oligarch that was really into space. So while I'm not usually a fan of Russian oligarchs, I am a fan of this Russian oligarch for giving SETI $100 million spread out over 10 years. So, and again, SETI indicated that they can only listen for basically 1 light year away. These big fancy telescopes, 1 year away. Now, so at the bottom of the slide here, you will see this is our Milky Way galaxy if you were to look at it from the side. Now, obviously, we don't have probes that can go outside the Milky Way galaxy to see what we look like from the side, so this is just an artist rendering. But from where we are, if you look on the left-hand side here, actually use the mouse, we are about 2/3 to the edge of our Milky Way galaxy. And we are spinning around, and it takes a super duper long time to go all the way around, but we're actually going pretty fast because this thing is just incredibly large. It's 100,000 light years apart. Just our galaxy alone. We're not even talking about to the next galaxy, which we'll actually talk about next. We're just talking about our galaxy, 100,000 light years apart. And so this little blip over here is 1,000 light years. And now, so of that 1,000, do 1/10 of 1%. So basically the line of that little box is how much of this we could actually hear if it was right next to us. So when the question is asked, how come we don't hear anything? How come we're not seeing anything? Well, we can't see or hear very far. We are basically blind and deaf. And so if you were to stand next to an animal that had no other senses of smell and had no senses whatsoever, couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't smell, couldn't feel you through electromagnetism or some other crazy thing like a bat, you could stand right next to them and they wouldn't know. Theory. And so we literally could have we could have an entire group of planets that are basically throwing a big party. They're not in quarantine. There's no pandemics for those planets, and they are basically just partying it up. And we would have no idea. We wouldn't be able to know. So, and so then we talk about the local group. So, we are 100,000 light years between one edge of our galaxy to the next. Well, our local group, the next galaxy closest to us, I believe, is the Andromeda galaxy, and that is 2.5 million light years away.
I have an update on that.
Yeah, go for it.
Actually, I used to think that as well. It's the nearest spiral galaxy like our own.
Okay.
Apparently, there's another one called the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. And it's about 25,000 light years from our solar system.
Oh, wow.
It's just that it's a dwarf galaxy, and so Andromeda is the one that we can actually see through a telescope in our night sky. And if you were in a real good dark sky site, you might even see a fuzzy patch of light. Mm-hmm. It's right near, I think, Ursa Major, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy is actually the closest within about 25,000 light years. But
so
traveling at warp 1, it'll still take you 25,000 years
right.
to get there. So,
and we still need warp 1. So if it's that close, I'm going to go back to this other screen. So we're 28,000 to the bulge. So it's roughly the same distance from us as we are to the center of our galaxy. So does that mean that it's above or below our galaxy? Is that what that means?
Well, you know what? I'm kind of looking at it right now here. Let me see here.
And I would
haven't
wonder
really
if long term, and we're talking billions of years, but I wonder long term if our galaxy would end up absorbing it, and if it has planets and stars of its own, or if it's just gas.
In fact, there is a model here showing it eventually being absorbed by our own galaxy. Yeah, and it's maybe only about half the size of our galaxy.
That's still pretty
But
big.
we're talking about, a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
And now we think the galaxies, of course, is that everything's drifting away from
Right.
itself. So,
Now, what is neat is that I didn't put down the amount of time, but it was billions and billions of years. That there are some galaxies, like the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way Galaxy, they think is actually going to form one super galaxy at some point. We are actually traveling towards each other, which, to your point, is actually not the norm. Most of space is expanding and moving apart. There's a really fun experiment, and I don't have a hands-on lesson for tonight, but if any cadets want to try this, or anybody at home, even if you're not in Civil Air Patrol, want to try this, if you want to try to look and conceptualize the expanding universe, take a balloon and then put don't blow it up, leave it uninflated, and put two dots right next to each other, and then blow up the balloon. And you'll see the dots separating from each other. And a lot of people believe that that's a really good analogy for the expansion of the universe. Now, that a whole nother lesson, and maybe Major Russell, we can get you back for this one. The fun conversation is about scientists are now starting to think that it's no longer the Big Bang, it's the Big Rebound. And so the space will, so a lot of scientists think that it's going to expand forever and ever and ever. And then atoms will tear apart and eventually the universe is just a dark place. That sounds sad to me too. It'll happen well after I'm gone. So I guess I won't worry about it. But another thought is that it's going to get so far out, and that this black matter, the stuff that we have, it makes up the majority of what's out there in space, and we don't know anything about it. I mean, for all we know, there could be an alien made of black matter sitting right next to us, yelling in our ear, asking why we can't hear it, as it's trying to tell us about the Andromeda Galaxy it visited last weekend. But a lot of people think that it's going to get to a certain point, and then it's going to basically reverse itself, and then over time come back together, and then basically bounce off itself once it gets certain closeness. I don't know.
fascinating theory.
Yeah, if we're here 4 trillion years from now, maybe we'll find out. So, and we're getting close to the end here. A couple last slides. Dr. Carol Cleland, she is a really fascinating individual. If you are interested, she is not like Elon Musk, where she's like super duper well known, and you could. Well, I guess you could tweet Elon Musk. So he does tweet back people. But you can actually find Dr. Carol Cleveland on what's the name of that business social media? LinkedIn. So you can find Dr. Carol Cleveland on LinkedIn, and you can send her an invite, and she'll respond back to you most likely. So she is a member of NASA's Astrobiology Institute. If I remember correctly, and I might have this wrong, I believe she is actually now she's working at Harvard, I think, as in the psychology wing. So how that tied to astrobiology, I'm not too sure. And it wasn't psychology. It was where you're thinking about how to think. I forgot. But anyways, so she has an important conversation on this. Is we look at life, but we only know it from our viewpoint. We only know it from our experience of one, what we've experienced on this planet. Until we see, if we ever see, life on other planets, they could be formed in ways that we can't even think about. So as an example that was given, if you look at crystals, crystals absorb nutrients. They grow. If you look at the crystalline structures inside of them, they have very specific patterns. A crystal, I didn't realize this, a crystal can actually move incredibly slowly to absorb new nutrients that are around it. So in a time scale that we're used to moving around, it looks like it's not moving. But if you were to actually record it over tens, hundreds of years, you would actually be able to register movement with a crystal. Now, obviously, we don't think it's thinking. We don't think it's talking to other crystals. But just for a second, think about that. Think about the fact that we, to another object, even on our own planet, we could be moving so fast. If you think about a camera, and if you set up a camera on a long exposure, and if you had somebody walking back and forth in front of the camera, to your eyes, you can see the person walking back and forth. But if you were to expose that, I'm going to age ourselves, Major Russell. If you were to expose the film, or if you were to take a look at that picture, that exposure, it would look like nothing was there. The movement in front of it was so fast that you didn't see it. So how do we know that a crystal doesn't talk to themselves? Maybe we are just so much faster of a life form than a crystal or something else out there, gas that's in the air. Maybe we can't fathom it. We don't have any sense of it because it doesn't tie into our timeline. It doesn't tie into what we're doing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, I have to go to a Star Trek analogy. There was actually a Star Trek episode that dealt with crystalline-based life, and they called it the crystalline entity. And it traveled through space. It could actually travel at warp speeds, and unfortunately, it consumed organic life, which of course made it dangerous to human beings and everything else it touched. But they supposedly in that episode did try to communicate with it through some kind of radio frequencies. So it's been postulated that there might be forms of life based on something entirely different than what we consider our normal carbon-based life.
Right.
So why not, right?
We don't know. It's the only thing we know. So, all right. So then the question becomes, and we're just about ready to wrap up here. So this is a good time if you haven't already, and if you wanted to post a question, go ahead and post your questions now. There is about a 20, as normally I tell you, there's about a 20-second delay from the time that we will be able to see your questions. We will respond to your questions, and about 20 seconds later, you will see the video of us responding. So if you are doing something live with us, just give us a little bit of time for us to see it and react to it. When you actually type it, I'll see it right away, but you won't see the response for about 20 seconds. So it goes, okay, have we been visited? So this is the overarching question. So Major Russell, what do you think? Now you have some historical here. You've been reading books, and you've got a lot of great thoughts here. So what do you think?
Well,
you think we've
probably
been visited?
far too much on this. Well, my interest in this goes back, and I'm 60 years old, I'll confess that. So my interest goes back towards the end of the Project Blue Book era. Project Blue Book, for those out there that might not heard about, was the Air Force study on UFOs that ran from 1947 to 1969, 22 years. And they investigated over 10,000 reports. And in that period of time, even dismissing, probably in some cases arbitrarily, many cases, they still came down to about 500 cases that had no natural explanation or other kinds of explanation for it. And so, and some people claim that Project Blue Book still continues in some other forms that's not official. But my interest in this has been going on for about 50 years, and there are some very notable cases that have made history. People probably heard about where the term flying saucer came from. That's an old term that predates even the term UFOs, which was really kind of founded by Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Dr. J. Allen Hynek had a cameo in the famous Spielberg film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And Dr. Hynek came up with the different forms of the first, second, third. I think there were 5 types of ways we can be connected to based on the evidence, so-called. So it goes back quite a long ways. The first case was supposedly in modern era, what we consider the modern era, middle 20th century, was Kenneth Arnold's sighting. And he was a pilot flying a small Piper type aircraft back in 1947. I think he was looking for on some kind of he was flying a business trip, and he spotted 9 objects, which he said seemed to skip across the water as they traveled in and around Mount Rainier. And he calculated the 20-some miles he was able to track these objects, and it was in broad daylight, that they covered a distance of 20-some miles in like 30 seconds or something like that between mountain peaks, and that he calculated they must have been going at least 1,700 miles an hour or something like that. And after he landed, reported back to the the control tower, what he had seen. There were some reporters waiting for him, and one of them founded the actual term that they called flying saucers because he said they appeared to skip across the water. But he didn't say that they were like flying saucers in shape, that they actually skipped like flying saucers. But the term stuck, as they say. So since that was basically the beginning of the modern UFO movement, and within about a month of that, another famous event occurred, which is still got a lot of controversy, and that's the Roswell incident that occurred within about 2 weeks after that incident in Mount Rainier, Washington. And then there's lots of stories. We could spend a lot of time, and maybe could do a follow-up on this in a future episode, something. There's just a lot of information, and some of it's very corroborated type of, people seeing on the ground, trusted observers, your police, your military, your professional types that are not given to flights of fancy or to telling lies or being dubious character. And there's just a lot of stories out there, and a lot of them have some very interesting collaboration to it with things like what we've seen, of course, with these Nimitz cases in the Navy. They've fully admitted that these are unexplained aerial phenomena, what they call UAPs. So what are we left to conclude from that? I guess they're leaving it up to us, right?
Yeah. They don't know, maybe, and we don't know. So
yeah. For more information, there's a website called the Disclosure Project, and you could look up the Disclosure Project, and there's a group of people of all kinds of different backgrounds, including many military and former military, that have come forward with testimonies over the years saying that they think we're being visited based on what they've seen. Yeah. So something to look at for your information.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that real quick too. So let me go back here. So this I think is hang on. This is one of my favorite scenes. Go. So
Close Encounters.
That's right. We'll play that in a second. So you talked about before about how did you say it? They were showing off.
Certainly my opinion. But.
Yeah, that there was possibly, if it was some type of UFO, some type of alien flight object. Again, we're just having fun talking here. But if it was something like that, why would it do that, right? So people go, okay, well, if aliens are really here, why aren't they knocking on the front door of the White House and saying, "Hey, we're here," right? Why wouldn't they just show up? So how would contact happen, right? So do they just show up? Do they, get within a half a light year away and say, "Hey, do you hear us now?" Right? It'd be like the Verizon guy, right? "Hey, can you hear me?" This is actually what a lot of people think is the last one. And this is actually what you alluded to a little bit, Major Russell, was that they would want the best way to do it wouldn't be just to show up. The best way wouldn't be to send a radio signal really far away. If they could do that, then they can probably get here, right? That the best way, the experts in this field say, is to just put a little bit of a taste out there, a little bit of a taste of it. Not enough for evidence, but we talk about the encounters first, second, and third, just the first kind, just the sightings, just a taste of sightings. Because then that will get the population of the Earth to start getting used to the idea of aliens. We have movies with aliens, right? In the past, all of our alien movies were horrible things out to destroy us. And still a lot of our movies are like that. But we actually have a lot more movies now that are actually pro-alien. And actually they make the Earthlings be the bad people, that are hurting the aliens. And so it's just that over time, that little bit of, social dialogue, and, we're having this conversation tonight, right? And that's exactly it. We're having this conversation. And so other people are having this conversation. And then they have the conversation of, okay, what happens if somebody shows up and knocks on the door? You know what? Maybe, and actually my doorbell just rang. Maybe that was E.T. So they thought they heard us talking about him. But so the majority of individuals think that actually is what could be going on. That the best way to do that is to do small hints. What do you think?
Well, you said why wouldn't they just show up and show them? Why wouldn't they just fly over the White House?
Hmm.
Well, there's actually a case history of something like that occurring. 1952, July. There is a very well-known case, very well documented. It's in the papers all around Washington that several objects were seen traveling over the Capitol building, the Capitol Square, and everything around there, and that jets were scrambled, and they could not get very close to them. And so there is actually a case. So if anybody's interested, look up 1952 July DC sightings. And these objects were hard to deny. They were there, they were being seen by thousands of people, and actually were tracked on radar from installations around there, and jets were scrambled, and it was reported in the papers the next day.
Oh.
So, they are jets of the day, which were, I think, the F-86 and the Starfighters and stuff like that were still pretty much subsonic at that time.
Hmm.
They couldn't get very close to these objects, and they
Oh.
were traveling well in excess of Mach speed.
Well, what's interesting about that is if we're talking about that timeline, you didn't have drones. It's very unlikely a missile. It was a group of missiles flying over, and missiles wouldn't change direction like that. So yeah. So it's like, at what point, what could it be? Could it be a weather balloon? Traveling at that speed, at that altitude? Probably not. So you have the encounters. So we have our first kind, which is sighting. So anybody wonders what the three different kinds of encounters are. Maybe we've had the first kind, maybe not. We'll leave that for you, our listeners and viewers, to think about yourselves tonight. We're not telling you. We're just having a fun conversation about it. And then the second kind would be physical evidence. And so that is where physical evidence is like, if how do I explain this right? So like if there was a spacecraft, you see it, that is first kind. If that spacecraft was emitting, say, radiation, and that radiation affected the ground, or it caused you a radiation burn on your skin, that would be second kind. Now, if ET comes out of it and touches you and shakes your hand, first of all, make sure ET's wearing a mask, because we don't know where ET's been. Make sure that you wash your hands after you touch ET's hands. Give him a fist bump and not a shake. You gotta watch out for the virus. And then this is our last slide. So we come in peace. The Stephen Hawking, rest his soul, was a famous astrophysicist. You will recognize him. He was the individual that was in a wheelchair for the second half of his life. Very, very famous astrophysicist. He thought that any alien race that was so powerful that they could get here, we wouldn't want to meet them. Because similar to how mankind, every time more advanced civilization finds a lesser advanced civilization, it usually doesn't work out very well for the less advanced civilization. Now, that being said, that's a pretty negative view.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
You are? Oh. My watch is speaking to me. And that was funny. I said, I'm having trouble hearing you. Well, maybe that's ET too. But a lot of people believe, if you're going to go through all that hassle to get here, you're probably not looking to colonize, but maybe you are. Maybe your planet's dying and your star is dying and you need a place to live. I don't know. But so what do you think? You think if we get ET, you think they're going to come in peace?
Perhaps they've already come.
Right.
And the fact that we're still here means that there's been some kind of relative peace between us. But there are actually some supposedly cases of, they're mysterious, of craft sent to scramble after UFOs, and the Thomas Mantell case, which was, I think, around late 1940s. It was a P-51 at that time. It was sent up to look at an object, and he supposedly described it in his radio, luminous object and things like that. He couldn't close too close, and eventually his airplane crashed and he died.
Oh.
Now, what did he possibly just exceed the performance envelope of that aircraft and crashed and died because of that? But that's at least one case that I know of that resulted in the death of a pilot pursuing a UFO. At least that's confirmed, that he did die in the pursuit of this UFO.
Right.
Was it from some kind of problem with the craft, or was he shot down? Who knows, right?
Right. Yeah, and the other thing too is, when we say UFO, right, it's unidentified flying object, right? So we don't know what it was. Doesn't mean it was ET. So if you ever hear
Or
somebody
that is
say,
even hostile.
yeah, or it was hostile. So for instance, if I looked in the sky right now and I saw, a moving light, to me that's a UFO. I don't know if it's an airplane. Now, if I were to go to the FAA and if I said, "Hey, I saw a UFO," they'd probably think I was nuts, because they could pull the radar log and show it was a 737 landing in Spartanburg. But a UFO is just that. It's an unidentified flying object. Doesn't mean anything more than that. All right. So that is it.
And there's a place that people can actually report UFO reports. One of the more well-known ones that keeps a consistent report is the National UFO Reporting Center. So if anybody ever wants to look up some information about, there are supposedly UFO sightings taking place daily somewhere in the world, and actually even in the United States. It's just that, guess what? It doesn't make the press anymore. Not like it did during these so-called UFO flaps of the 50s, 60s, 70s, or what have you. So the National UFO Reporting Center is one that I've heard about that continues to take daily reports from people. And they even report on the radio once a week, and I've heard some of those reports. And so there are objects continuing to be observed, at least reported by people on an almost daily basis here in the United States.
Well, very good.
Just we don't hear about it in the news about it. So.
Yeah, you don't hear. So I'm taking a look at, we have a couple of folks that are online. So thank you for the folks that are online that have posted. This was a long, so I saw we had a bunch more on the beginning of the video, and we're down to about 12 that are live. So welcome to everybody that's still here. Yeah, the faithful 12. And so I saw mostly it's people just saying good evening and that kind of stuff. And I see that Denise Morgan's getting picked on, that she's a third kind. so
That's cruel. Nothing of the case.
That's true. So yeah, other than that, so if anybody has any questions for us, I'll keep an eye out on here. You aren't able to see this, Major Russell, but if we get any questions, I'll relay them to you. All right. So if in case we don't get anything, I did want to say a special thank you. Man, we went 90 minutes, and for those of you that weren't with us, Major Russell and I were on for just about an hour before trying to frantically get the video conferencing up and working. And literally, and we are not kidding, got it up within a minute of going live. Like the countdown clock was spinning.
Don't try to operate that way.
Yeah, but it actually was a good thing to show, because some people would say, well, we got 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before, it ain't working, so let's just give up on it. And we didn't give up on it, and you kept at it. You personally kept at it, and we ended up having a really fantastic lesson because you did, and I really appreciate you for joining and spending that much time tonight.
Well, Lieutenant Roberts, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a subject that even though I've known about for 50 years, I don't get an opportunity to talk about very often. It's kind of in the realm of Bigfoot sightings with some people. So, but the fact is there's some intelligence science being done around this subject nowadays, and I think it's passed from the ridicule stage to like what if, and a lot of people that we consider credible people have seen objects over the years, even including a couple U.S. presidents. And so it's a credible subject. And it's about time to take it out of the tabloids and into the realm of science and hard facts and try to apply some modern methodologies to it. Yeah,
if you Jimmy Carter being a big one for on the president's side, I believe he has personally said that he has seen a UFO. And he said that, and he said that when he was a much younger man than he is right now. And
I think he was currently governor of Georgia at the time when that occurred. Yeah.
And he did not shy away.
He filed a report to it and everything, and you can look it up. Jimmy Carter's UFO report, and you'll find his filed report. He was not alone at the time either. There were at least 3 or 4 other people with him, I think, at the same time.
So. Well, with that, I am not seeing any specific questions. I am just seeing a lot of thank yous and great jobs around. So again, thank you very much for the lesson. Now, I just saw Burke Hansen gave us a thank you. And I do want to point out that next week we are going to be doing another one of these Skype video lessons because we have our second cadet AEO who is going to be doing a lesson on airports for us. And
Look forward to it.
Yeah, so that'll be Burke Hansen next week. And so with that, thank you again, Major Russell. It was great having you on tonight.
Thank
and,
you.
I
Thank you,
appreciate
everybody,
you
for listening to us tonight. Hope we didn't bore you too much.
Yep. And with that, thank you, everybody, and have a great night. Bye, all.
Good night.
Thank you.